as Dune Part 2 has hit the theaters with a record success, breaking Shawshank Redemption's 30-year-old record of highest rated film, it is high time to revisit Dune Part 1 since it's been almost 2 years now. So without wasting any time, let's go back to the mysterious planetary war movie that is Dune. The movie starts with a woman from a desert planet called Arrakis. She talks about how her people have suffered under the rule of House Harkonnen for a long time. This house has control over the planet's spice, which is really important for traveling between the stars. They've become super rich because of it, even richer than the Emperor. But suddenly, the Emperor decides to give Arrakis to House Atreides instead. This change takes us to their home planet, Caladan, in the year 10,191. We first meet Paul Atreides, who's the only son and heir of Duke Leto Atreides, and he wakes up from a reoccurring dream and has breakfast with his mom Jessica. During breakfast, they talk about something called the Voice, which is a power used by a group called the Bene Gesserit, a sisterhood to control others. Jessica is part of this group and she teaches Paul how to use it, but he finds it difficult to learn. Later, Paul focuses on studying the Fremen, the people of the Arrakis planet, as he prepares for a ceremony where his family will become the rulers of Arrakis. Through his studies, we learn that the Fremen deeply value a substance called spice, which they see as both important and sacred, giving them blue eyes called the Eyes of Ebad. Paul also learns about the tough life the Fremen lead, dealing with harsh sandstorms that can even pierce metal, and the constant danger from huge sandworms called the Shai-Hulud that live outside the city walls in the desert. Soon after, the ceremony begins with House Atreides being welcomed by representatives from the Imperial Court, delegates from the Spacing Guild, and the Truthsayers signaling the official transfer of power over Arrakis. Despite Leto suspecting that this decision had bad intentions, a feeling that he shares with Paul, he explains his belief that their new control over Arrakis is a trick to make them vulnerable to attack. Understanding this, Leto decides to form an alliance with the Fremen, and he sends his top warrior, Duncan Idaho, along with a team to Arrakis to make contact with them. Back on Giedi Prime, the home planet of House Harkonnen, their leader, Lord Baron, meets with his nephew Glossu Rabin. Rabin is furious about being kicked out of Arrakis, but Vladimir calms him down by saying that this situation is a chance to get rid of House Atreides. Later, Paul gets training from Gurney, a respected member of his father's close group. They practice fighting with energy shields, which can only block slow-moving weapons. Paul shows a lot of improvement, but he still doesn't realize how dangerous their situation is. Gurney warns him about the seriousness of the threat, saying that the Harkonnens are more ruthless than any enemy that they've ever faced. Later that night, Paul is awakened by his mother and taken to meet Reverend Mother Helen Mohem. She's important because she used to teach Jessica at the Bene Gesserit school and now advises the Emperor. Before Paul meets her, Jessica asks the house doctor, Dr. Yu, to check his health. While examining him, Dr. Yu warns Paul about the Bene Gesserit, saying that they claim to work for the greater good, but also pursue their own interest. Paul is brought before Mohem, and she uses her voice to make him kneel before her. She tests his impulses to see if he's worthy of the power that he got from his mother, and the test was very tough as he had to put his hand in a box while enduring a lot of pain. Mohem would hold a poison needle to his neck, and at first, Paul finds it hard to stay calm, but eventually, he overcomes his fear and seems to get used to the pain, so Mohem lets him go. After the test, Mohem talks to Jessica and scolds her for having a son instead of a daughter, as that was what the Bene Gesserit wanted. But Jessica believes strongly that Paul is the Kwisatz Haderach, a belief that Mohem doesn't share. As Mohem leaves, Paul confronts Jessica about their conversation, and she tells him the truth. The Bene Gesserit work secretly to control politics and have been trying for ages to control a special person who is the Kwisatz Haderach, who can do amazing things beyond space and time. Skipping ahead a few weeks to where House Atreides arrives on Arrakis, they are warmly welcomed by Tafur Hawat, who heads their security team along with the rest of the advanced group. Meanwhile, the Fremen watch from afar, chanting phrases like Lisan el-Gaib to Paul, which means voice from the other world and Messiah. Jessica thinks that the Bene Gesserit have influenced the Fremen over many years to see Paul as their long-awaited savior. According to Fremen stories, this person is a messianic figure, but Paul isn't sure about all this. He thinks the Fremen are just seeing things through their own beliefs rather than seek the truth. After settling in Arrakis, the capital of Arrakis, which is protected from the sandstorms by natural barriers, Paul continues his studies. He learns the sandworms are attracted to rhythmic sounds, so the Fremen use a dance-like technique called sandwalk when they move in the desert. His studies, though, are interrupted when he sees a hunter-seeker, a deadly remote-controlled weapon, enter his room. It aims for his eye with lethal intent, but Paul acts fast, stopping and disabling it, and this attempt to kill him puts everyone on high alert. The next day, Leto gets a report from Duncan about his meeting and 4 weeks stay with the Fremen. Duncan explains that the Fremen live in communal settlements called seiches, which has about 10,000 people in each one, spread across many communities. Stelgar, the leader of Duncan's seich, joins them and respectfully asks that they don't go into Fremen territories or look for their seiches, and instead, he wants them to focus on harvesting spice and leaving the desert alone. Leto can't promise this right away, but he assures Stilgar that the Fremen seiches will be respected as long as he's in charge and that they won't be harmed under his rule. Later, Leto, Paul, and Gurney are invited to tour the spice harvesting operation in the desert by Dr. Light Kynes. This doctor was appointed by the Emperor as the judge of change. Before the tour, they're given special suits called still suits, and Light Kynes explains that these units are crucial for staying cool and recycling sweat to save water. Without them, survival in the desert would be impossible for more than 2 hours. During the tour, they see a sandstorm in the distance, attracted to the rhythmic sounds from the harvesters. To stay safe, the crew calls for a crawler to lift the harvester, but one of the crawler's anchors doesn't work, so they quickly move the crew to their small fleet of ornithopters, and while helping the crew onto the ship, Paul breathes in some spice and almost gets caught by the sandworm. He collapses as he sees vision of the Fremen woman again, and she kisses and stabs him, and he hears Kawat's Haderach awakens in his mind, but luckily, Gurney was there to save him and bring him back onto the ship. When they get back to Arrakis, Paul talks to Kynes, feeling frustrated that everything they've taken over seems chaotic, like they've been set up to fail. But Kynes says she can't help them, and meanwhile, Paul tells his mother about his visions while being examined by Dr. Yue, and he talks about seeing his own death, but not exactly, and mentions the importance of a knife, thinking someone will give him one eventually. Though a lot of his vision is unclear, Paul is sure about one thing. Jessica is pregnant. Later, Jessica tries to talk to Leto about Paul's experiences, but Leto wasn't interested in the details. He just wanted to make sure that if anything happens, both Jessica and the Bene Gesserit will protect Paul. Jessica promises to protect him with her life, but she couldn't guarantee the same for the Bene Gesserit. During these events, Mohim travels to Gedi Prime to meet with the Baron, and she tells him that the Emperor will help them take over Arrakis and will give them a starter car army. But she says that Jessica and Paul, because of their connection to the Bene Gesserit, should be kept safe and allowed to go into exile. Vladimir agrees to this, but after Mohim leaves, his true plans are revealed. He tells his servant that no one from the House Atreides should survive. That night, the Baron's plan unfolds as the Harkonnen and the Sardaukar armies attack Atreides, launching a full-on assault on House Atreides. Communication is blocked and shields are turned off by Dr. Yu, who also attacks Leto, shooting him in the back with a hunter-seeker that gets through his shield and injects him with a paralyzing poison. Yu explains that he betrayed Leto, saying that the Harkonnens have his wife Wana, and they're gonna kill her if he doesn't do what they ask. Yu made a deal with the Baron to get her back, and despite what he's done, he still cares about Leto, as shown by his secret plan. He puts a fake tooth in Leto's mouth that when when crushed, releases a deadly poison into the air. And if you choose the right moment, it won't be your last breath, and it will be the Baron's, he tells him, and he assures Leto that he should kill the Baron because technically all of this is the Baron's fault. He then takes Leto to face the Baron, while the fate of the rest of House Atreides is uncertain. We then see Paul and Jessica, who are captured by the Harkonnen with a cruel plan of being left to die in the harsh desert. However, they escape this fate when Paul, aided by his mother using sign language, used the voice on one of the captors, forcing them to remove Jessica's gag, and taking advantage of the situation, she uses the voice, overpowering their captors before skillfully landing the ship safely. Meanwhile, the Doctor brings Leto to the Baron as they agreed, and after completing his task, Vladimir allows Yu to join his wife in death by swiftly beheading him. Then he turns his attention to Leto, eager to end the Atreides family line once and for all. However, Leto cleverly triggers the poison-filled truth, releasing its deadly contents into the air. The toxin kills everyone in the room, although the Baron survives the worst effects due to his protection on his body, and by also rising up the ceiling before the poison makes it to his bloodstream. Paul and Jessica, despite their desperate situation, they discover a Fremen kit inside the ship, containing Leto's ring and a heartfelt note from Yu confirming Leto's death. As they struggle with their sorrow and try to endure the night, Paul accidentally breathes in spice from the tent, triggering yet another disturbing vision, and this time of a holy war spreading across the universe in his name. Jessica tries to comfort him, but he breaks down in anguish, blaming the Bene Gesserit for making him an outcast before collapsing into her arms. The next morning, to their surprise, Duncan rescues them, and he escaped Harkonnen in a ship and brought Dr. Kynes, who's convinced to help them. With Kynes' guidance, they hide at an old ecological testing station to avoid being found, and Paul tries to convince Kynes to tell the Great House about the Emperor's betrayal against the Atreides. But both Kynes and Jessica are unsure and worried it might cause chaos in the Empire. So Paul decides that they have to take the throne themselves. Their discussions are abruptly cut short by the sudden arrival of the Sardurker at the facility, bringing violence upon the Fremen. In a short, brave effort to shield the others, Duncan confronts the soldiers, sacrificing himself to guarantee Paul and Jessica's getaway. With sadness weighing on them, they escape in a ship, unable to take Kynes due to limited space. Before long, they're chased into a fierce sandstorm by the relentless Sardurker, causing them to lose control of their vessel. In the midst of the chaos, Paul has another vision, and this time of a Fremen advising him to move with the flow of the process of life. He also hears mystical voices urging him to let go, and he follows their advice, and surprisingly, surrendering helps them survive, guiding them safely through the storm until they crash land in the desert. Meanwhile, Kynes activates a trumper, a device that creates vibrations in the ground to attract sandworms, but her efforts are interrupted as she's brutally stabbed in the back by the advancing Sardurker troops. Despite her fatal wounds, Kynes summons her last strength to pound the ground, drawing the attention of the Shai Halud, and in a quick and brutal turn of events, the soldiers meet their end at the jaws of the sandworm, along with Kynes herself. Meanwhile, on Getty Prime, Raven tells the Baron about Paul and Jessica's supported deaths, and in reply the Baron tells them to start selling their spice reserves to wipe out all the Fremen. Turning back to Paul and Jessica, as they trek through the barren landscape through a nearby sitch using a sandwalk technique, their attempts to avoid catching the attention of the San Halud seems unsuccessful as the massive creature heads toward them. Thankfully, Aran activates a thumper, diverting the Shai Halud's attention elsewhere. However, their relief is short-lived as they find themselves surrounded by a group of Fremen, including Stilgar and Jemis, the man Paul had seen in his vision. Recognizing Paul from their earlier encounter with Leto, Stilgar offers him sanctuary due to his youth and potential to learn their ways. However, Jessica's fate appears dire as she's targeted for execution. But their attacker's plan is quickly foiled by Jessica's skill, especially when she outmatches Stilgar. Impressed by her abilities, Stilgar extends an olive branch and invites them to return to their stitch in peace. As an understanding is reached, Paul meets Chani, the Fremen woman from his visions, and while she doubts his prophesized role as the Lasan al-Gaib, she agrees to welcome them into their sitch. However, tensions escalate as Jamis calls upon Amal's rule, a challenge to prove one's strength against Jessica. Despite Stilgar's hesitation, Paul feels compelled to accept the challenge on her behalf, and before the duel, Paul has unsettling visions, but Chani interrupts, urging him to embrace honor. She gives him a Kryze knife made from the Shah Haduth's tooth, symbolizing his readiness for battle. The duel begins, and surprisingly, Paul quickly defeats Jamis. However, he must follow the Amal rule and take Jamis' life. With his win, Paul and Jessica are welcomed into the Sitch by Stilgar, confirming his place amongst the Fremen. Despite Jessica's wish to leave the planet, Paul decides to stay and join the Fremen in their fight against the Emperor, embracing his destiny in the desert. The movie ends as they enter the Sitch Tabar, accompanied by a Fremen riding a sandworm. And that wraps up our recap of Dune, and if you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Share your thoughts on the film in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more content. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our recap. Like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.